Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, and today I would like to bring forward for you information about the moon and lunar cycles. In the last video that I went over the solar information and the pathway of the sun and some of the basics of how that cycle plays into our lives and how it taps into that masculine energy patterns and forms through the year. So today I decided I would do one on the lunar information as well. So the moon's associated primarily with the element of water, which when you look at the tides and you go back through history, that association's not that out of the norm. The metal associated with the moon tends towards silver. Again, it's a watery element, or watery metal. It tends towards the feminine in nature. The angel associated with the moon in its feminine aspect is Archangel Gabriel, but in some cultures the moon is seen as masculine, and this is not a common thing, but when it is, you'll see the Archangel Sandalphon associated with the moon. The energy of the moon tends towards the intuitive or the psychic. It's very gentle energy, and it's very feminine. It's also very emotive. Your emotions, in a lot of ways, if you really pay attention to them, and this may be new information, so you can start looking at it, following the lunar cycle through new moon, full moon, and back to new, your emotional charges will follow that as well. So, starting off, you have the new moon, which is the beginning of a lunar cycle. It's when the moon is literally blacked out. You can't see it. And if you do, it's like on the horizon and it's just a black orb. This is for fresh starts and new beginnings. It's a really good time for self-reflection. If you're going to start journaling, it's something that you've wanted to start doing, the new moon is the perfect night to do that. And in all honesty, the new moon and the full moon, we usually reference them as a single night. It's actually a period of 3 days. So you don't have to do it like, oh, the calendar says on this date, the day before, the day of, or the day after. They're all fine to start projects on. It's also a good time to set your monthly intentions or goals. And when I say monthly, it actually means a 2-week window that you have, because the new moon to the full moon is when your intentions build. It's how you build and start to really grow things in your life. And during this time with the new moon, because all this energy is recycling and you're starting to build for new projects, you tend to be a little bit more tired. You want to sleep. But when you sleep, because there's this new energy charge, you don't really sleep well, even when you are asleep. It's a really weird balance, but it is something that does happen. So then we move from the new moon, you go into this period of the waxing moon, which is after your new moon cycle, you have about 10 days or so, which is called the waxing moon. And this is the four section part of the calendar. There's also an 8-part, which I'll go into next. But during the waxing moon, it's when the moon is actually going from nothing and it's starting to swell through the slivering period all the way up to just before the full moon. And this is when you are doing the action for your intentions and your goals. It's how, when you set that stuff in your mind, this is where it starts to come into full manifestation. This is where you're really putting that energy into it to build it. You're visualizing it every day. You're working towards it with, any energy that you are putting in that. And this is also when any hiccups are going to show up. The benefit is, during this time, this is also when you can clear those hiccups. Nothing is set in stone during the waxing moon. It's the growth period. It's malleable still. So if you set an intention and 5 days in, you're like, I need to fix this. This is not exactly what I want. You can still do that during this waxing period. I mean, understand, we can create our lives as we want them. So nothing's truly set in stone in a lot of these energetic ways, because until full manifestation, you can still tweak it. And while you're going through this waxing period, it's time to definitely stay focused and work on those decisions and plans that are going to align with your goal. Then you come up to the full moon, which if you're looking at a calendar, it's the day before, the day of, and the day after is that full moon energy at its fullest. And this is a time when your intentions or your goals will manifest. When you're working with solar energy, you're looking at the long-term and very big, broad-ranging intentions and goals. When you're working with the moon, these are more short-term goals, things that you can work on in a quicker pace, things that you can manifest in a quicker path. It doesn't mean one is better than the other or less important. It's just a different way of working on it. And it's basically what you're willing to work with, because in some things, you're going to see it as, oh, that's easy. I can manifest that in a month. There's other things that you're going to see as, I need a whole year to manifest that. But then somebody else will see the complete opposite of those. So it's all on where you're at on your spiritual journey, and we are all at where we're supposed to be. So just as a word of encouragement, don't judge yourself harshly if what you're intending and what you're trying to manifest takes a little bit longer, because maybe on a spiritual level that wasn't quite what you were working towards for your higher good. So there's always a lot more going on behind the scenes. But during the full moon, this is, like I said, the short-term manifestations are going to really show up. This is when your personal illumination comes up, which is where you start to see yourself in a very clear way, where you see yourself from kind of the ultimate observer, like from source energy. And so you're seeing yourself more cleanly, more open. Like you can see, oh, I need to work on that area, but man, I'm doing good over here. That's awesome. So you can see your wins and your losses and things that you need to work on, lessons you need to learn. The full moon is great for revealing those. This is also, because you're seeing things clearly, a really good time for emotional climaxes where you're just happy and things are doing really well. Or the other, where the smallest thing can set you off. Emotional upheaval and outburst is extremely strong during this time. So it's advisable to make sure that you are focusing on the positive and really keeping your energy focused in that direction. And once you start really focusing there, it becomes easier to stay there. This is also a natural conclusion to your intention that you made on the new moon. And it's when your intuition is truthfully the strongest. And if you're starting out and you're wanting to build your intuition, you're trying to build these mental, or if you would like, psychic skills, the full moon is a really good time to work on that. And you get those 3 days every 28 days. So you really can, work and practice and then try those new skills out, and then work and practice and try those new skills out, because the full moon is going to boost whatever else you've got going on. So it's really a benefit in that respect. The primary drawback to the full moon is it's a very emotionally charged time. Like I said earlier, if you are in a stressful situation, when the full moon comes around, it would be better to step away from the group you're with if you can. The ancients used to use the term lunacy, luna. It's a lunar craziness is what it was. You also talk about like werewolves, and they follow the moon. Well, werewolf used to be a symbol. Again, there is some belief that werewolves were real, but there was also this belief that it was an emotional upheaval that caused a psychological break. And so for 3 days of a full moon, a person would literally go crazy during that time period. So emotional overwhelm is very, very common at the full moon. And if you don't believe me, ask a law enforcement officer or an EMT, and they will tell you every time it's the full moon when the crazy happens. Then we go into the waning moon. And this is after the period of the full moon, moving towards that approximate 10-day window to the new moon energy again. This is a time for letting go, offering forgiveness to yourself and to others. Basically, you're letting go of karma. And it's a time when you're releasing the things that are not serving you. So the stuff that you may have seen during the full moon, where as your personal illumination wakes up and you're like, whoa, this is where I'm at, this is what I need to let go of, then you move into the waning moon and you can work on letting it go. It's also a good time for organizing and cleaning. It's that surrendering of the stuff that's just not working for you. Like, why are you fighting about this? It's not helping you. Just let it go. And then it's also a period of recuperation, because the waxing and the full moon require a lot of emotional and mental energy. And when it comes to the waning moon, it's just a time to take care of yourself. Do some self-care, maybe take a nap if you have the time. Things like that, just to kind of take care of yourself and recover from the cycle that is going on. And then there's this other view, and this is not one that I tend to work with very often on a personal level, mainly because the 4 pattern of the cycle is way more functional for my life, but some people like to have it more broke down. And that is where you go into the new moon period, which is literally that day, and same intentions. The waxing crescent and the first quarter and the waxing gibbous moons are just the breakups of the waxing period. The waxing crescent, you're building that momentum. The first quarter, double checking your goal, making sure it's what you want. The waxing gibbous, really pump that energy into your intentions. Full moon, manifest it. And then you go into the waning gibbous, which is where you start to reevaluate what are you letting go of, and you're starting to do those forgiving practices. The last quarter period, you're really focused on just letting it go. You're burning the angry letters and things like that. And then the waning crescent is that recovery period where you're not working actively in your spiritual practice other than like prayer and meditation. So that is a breakdown of the 8-period cycle. Like I said, I prefer the 4, new, waxing, full, waning, but that's just because that's what works for me in my life. So, and my goal with doing a lot of this stuff is just to bring the information forward, and then you can apply it to your life as you want. I'll tell you what I do and what I preference, and then you can decide if it's something you like, and if it's not, ditch it and find something better. I mean, that's what spiritual journeys are for, is to learn, educate, share what you know, and start to build that tribe of people you can work with because your goals or your intentions are similar. Then, with the full moon energy, the ancients believed that each full moon had very specific energy. Each full moon brought a certain type of lifestyle. So what I'll do right now is I will give you the month and the name of the full moon for that month and kind of why they got that story. Some of them are very obvious, other ones you'll scratch your head going, why? And if you're in the southern hemisphere, the names I believe are still the same. You'll have to check a calendar for that because I don't know enough. Sorry, I've studied for a lot of years, but I've studied northern hemisphere, not southern hemisphere. So the meanings are probably very similar. It's just it may be in a different month, like a 6-month switch. But January in the northern hemisphere is called the wolf moon, which is when a lot of the times you'll hear that wolf baying. The nights tend to be very crystal clear, so you can hear noises out in that cold, snowy environment for longer distances. There's no leaves on the trees, there's nothing really to block that sound, and so you would hear the wolves really howling at that time. And it was also a time when they would come in to get your flock, so or your herd. So it was a time when you wanted to be more cautious, but because it was so cold and so risky to be outside, because you had those big predators roaming around, you tended to stay more indoors. Then you had the snow moon in February. Now the snow moon you would think would be December, but that's not the case. And this was primarily because these were the last of the really big snowfalls in the northern hemisphere. Now that's not to say that we still don't have March or snow in March and April, but the last of the really big blizzard type storms were in February. And then you go into the worm moon, which is March's moon. And that's when you start to notice, as the snow melts, you'll start seeing the worms popping back up, from what I can read about it. It's also a sign that Earth is starting to wake back up and warm up, and like life is returning. Then you go into the pink moon, which is April's full moon. And it's weird because I've seen this a few times in my lifetime where the full moon in April actually does have a pinkish hue to it, which it could be just the atmosphere I'm in, but but it was that symbol of there's more life coming back, because it was some of your first flowers in the springtime tend towards the pinks and the whites. So there was a combination of things that were going on in April. Then you move into May, which is the flower moon. And the old saying, April showers bring May flowers. This was a period when you either were planting the summer flowers or the spring perennial type flowers were really starting to come up. You were starting to bud them out. They were starting to, some of them would bloom at this point. Daffodils and tulips, and in some cases peonies, if that time was lined up. I've seen irises bloom as early as May 15th, depending on the year, of course. So the May time was just mainly for the flowers. Everything was blooming, everything's coming back to life, showing off their spring foliage type thing. Then you have the strawberry moon in June. And in the northern areas, that tends to be when your first crop of strawberries are starting to come on the vines. That does not mean that you're by any means at full volume, but that's when they start to show up. And then you go into July, which is the buck moon. And that's when you really start to notice in deer you have bucks, and in elk you'll see bulls. And this is when you really start to notice the males showing up with their antlers, and they're coming out of velvet, and they're posturing, and they're not in breeding terms yet, so they're not making a lot of noise, but you're starting to see a lot more of the antlers showing up. Then you go into August and the sturgeon moon. And the sturgeon moon is, I believe, for the fish, and this was a good time for harvesting them. I'm not a fish person, so yeah. Then you go into September and the harvest moon, and this is the second harvest. Your first harvest was in August, your second harvest is September. But the harvest moon was your big harvest. This is when you're swathing your fields, you're willowing your hay, or your wheat and your grains. This was when a lot of the plant life was dying down, and this is when you really had that push to set things up for the winter, so you're doing your big harvest in September. Fruits and vegetables and grains, like all of it are getting harvested. Then in October, you have your hunter moon. And the hunter moon was a time when you were hunting the animals that would give you the protein to survive the winters. It was also a time of butchering. And it also coincides a lot with the holiday of Samhain, which was the day of remembrance and celebration of the people who had passed over. So the month of October overall tended towards being death-centered. And that sounds really bad, but in a culture who's driven by agriculture and day-to-day life, and we don't just go to the store every day, the October time period said whether you would survive the winter or not. That was a time when you needed to know, and so the hunting was a big, big part of life. Then you go into the beaver moon in November. And this was kind of the start of a hibernation pattern for a lot of animals, but that's when you'd really notice that the beavers tended to disappear because they were going into their little homes and they were trying to batten down the hatches, but the bears would go into hibernation in this time period, and you just saw a lot of these bigger animals, or the hibernating animals, starting to go away at this time. And that led into the cold moon of December. In a lot of regions, December is the coldest month. Where I'm from in Idaho, the coldest month tends to be late January, early February. There's a 2-week window in there that tends to drop below zero and stay there. But in a lot of places, December is the coldest month of that year, so the cold moon for that time makes sense. Now, there is some interesting little things that show up randomly in a generally 18-month cycle, one of which is the blue moon. And the blue moon is classified as a 13th full moon in a calendar year. Now, in the way we judge our calendars, that would mean it's the second full moon in a calendar month. And this only applies, like I said, every 18 or so calendar months, the way we have our calendar set up. just the way, Earth and the moon cycle. And there have been years where they occur more frequently due to the way we do have our calendar set up. When you have a full moon, these are times for a benefit to you. This is when you really do reach out and tap into your guides and your guardians, divine source energy. You really start to open up to those other realms. And that's when, if you have a spiritual journey that you're really wanting to work on, or something specific that you're trying to bring up in your life, learn, or process, these are the times when you really do have an open door policy with the divine, and they can come through and really work with you. And it's really interesting to meditate and do guided meditation like path workings on a blue moon, because there is a different energy. It's subtle, which most lunar energy is subtle, but there is definitely something unique about a blue moon. And this, like I said, this is times where the doors open, more open. Not as open as it is on like Samhain and Beltane, but it's definitely open. And this is also a really good time to do, if you practice divination, this is a time to really look at life path guidance. So if you're doing the runes, if you cast sticks, if you're doing I Ching, if you do tarot, scrying, all of these different things, this is a really good time to look at the life path. Are you on the right path? Of course you are. But is there a way that you can maybe tweak it a little bit to maybe redirect it so that it's a better path? And this is the blue moons are times to look at that. And they come up every 18 months, so every year and a half, it's always good to double check and make sure you're doing the right thing, talk to spirit and make sure, like, this is what I was told last time, this is where I'm headed, what's the next good step? It's time to realign with others as well. So if you've been feeling off when you're going through your life path in this process on a blue moon, you can also tap into, I'm feeling a little off with this person in my life. Is there a way that I can correct it? Are our journeys starting to separate? Is there something that we can do to rebuild it? And it's questions like that you can start to work through during this time as well. The other part though, and this is, again, I want to give both sides of every story. I don't do just airy-fairy, flowery stuff. I want to be down and dirty as well, so you know what to expect. The blue moon, because it is a full moon, can be extremely explosive. Like, you're very emotional. You can be very emotional during a normal full moon. During a blue moon, because that veil is a little bit thinner between the worlds, it can become downright explosive. So when you know that there's a blue moon coming up, and if you are like me, where you're really tapped into that energy, and so you feel those emotional upheavals and those emotional spikes following the lunar cycle, during a blue moon, it's good to just avoid some stress, slow down, be gentle with yourself, be more understanding with other people. Stuff that would normally have you quick response, bite your tongue, so that because they're just as volatile as you are. It's the same energy, it's just you're two people. So you really want to make sure that you're aware of where you're at in life and how not to overstep that energy field, because the blue moon energy manifests things in a big way, and during the blue moon cycle, things tend to be a little bit more permanent. So you don't want to, destroy a friendship over a really small misunderstanding, but you had all this lunar energy coming in that set things a little bit more firmly. And with the blue moon, the other part with this that is more of a heads up, the blue moon tends to bring anything emotional, anything that you're trying to repress or hide, it brings it right out into the open where you have to deal with it. You might be hiding something from yourself or your family. It could be repressed emotions. It could be repressed identity issues. Well, these people think I'm this really confident, proud leader, but the blue moon's going to be like, yeah, you are faking it. You need to work on some things. It could be something like everybody thinks that I'm this type of sexuality, gay, lesbian, whatever, the blue moon energy is going to be like, here's a mirror. You need to reevaluate some things. Doesn't mean good, bad, or indifferent. It means you need to understand who you are. And that's what the blue moon energy will do, is show you very clearly who you are and how to reintegrate that back into yourself. Because when we're separated and we're repressing things, you can't be whole emotionally. You can't be whole mentally. When you repress, you're literally saying this part of me is not good enough. And the moon cycles every 28 days. The moon is trying to tell you, we're going to work on the small thing here, because there's this bigger thing that you need to look at once every year and a half or so. So we're going to work through these smaller pieces of who you are. And then when it comes to the blue moon period, we can show you this is why we were doing this. The solar energy tends to be more bombastic, like this is where we're at, but it's going to take a little bit, and it's really gets the energy flowing and rolling because you're building on a broad ranging scale, very physical, very domineering type energy. The lunar energy is emotional based, so it tends, like I said, it has that feminine flow to it. And that's why when you tap into it, you work through emotional and mental problems and issues or struggles, anything like that, but you're doing it in smaller windows of time, because emotions are tricky. And if you let them overwhelm you, you actually lose control. And when you lose control, that's when you have this breaks of, well, I need to repress this part because it's not good enough, or I need to hide this piece of me because so-and-so over on the corner doesn't like that part of me. So there's parts of them they don't like either. What is your point? So when you can come to that understanding of, it's okay if they don't like me. I do. I like this part of me. I like this part of me. I like I've got really long hair. I can tell you right now, there are people who do not like that. Do I let it bother me? No. Because this is me. This is my body. It's my hair. I'm the one who has to wash it, braid it, deal with it. They have their own issues. Why am I worried about what they're thinking about my issues? I'll deal with me. You deal with you. So the moon is trying to show you this, and that's why you go from, here's a new project, let's work on that. We come to the full moon. Here's the project that's finished. This is something you might want to look into and try to work through it. Then you have a period of time to work through it and let it go. Understand how this fits into your life or doesn't, and release it. And then you get to start over again. But it's done in smaller increments of time so that it's easier to process these bigger views. So hopefully that resonated for you guys, or at least gave you some idea of how you can work with the lunar cycle. Again, these are kind of intro videos. I'm trying to get a little bit more comfortable and kind of build some ideas. So if you like this, go ahead and like it. Subscribe if you like what I'm doing. And honestly, leave comments. I would love to know what you guys are thinking about where I'm at, what I'm doing. And I will build future videos based on comments and feedback. I mean, I've got my own list of stuff, but I really do want to help others kind of sort through their spiritual journeys. Non-mainstream spiritual journeys can be a little bit of a struggle, especially when you think that you're the only one that thinks that way. But there's groups out there. We all think differently. I mean, I've met several different groups over the years, and some I resonate with and some I really don't. So that's what my goal is just to kind of, help people understand it. And if something comes up and it's like, that didn't make a bit of sense, let me know. I really would like to hear from people. So other than that, I will talk to you guys later, and I hope that you all have a blessed week, and we will see you in the next video.